Welcome to the Top Order podcast. It's Raj, Binksy and Lippy with you this week. Freshly shorn with a new haircut. Fly from the barber salon, I think, as the Fresh Prince said. We're going to talk all things England versus West Indies. We'll also talk a little bit of England White Ferns. And we'll also talk about the Gambhir era starting for India in their T20 series against Zimbabwe. All coming up on the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned. Well, boys, I've got the producer role as well. I think I've managed to press the button and feeling quite weird with the headphones on. Normally, Baldy's got those over his coiffured locks. But we're three of us.
Ear chat today.
I've had a
premium.
I've had a fresh shave as well, and a bit of a polish on the top. We've got some cricket going on, but I have to say, probably from an international perspective, it's relatively quiet at the moment. We've got, I think, just the one franchise tournament going on as well in the NLC.
The 100's just started.
And the 100 started, 2 days or so ago, a win for the Oval Invincibles in game one. But we're going to talk some red ball cricket, aren't we, to start with England, West Indies second test at Trent Bridge in the PJA era. That's the post-Jimmy Anderson era. Okay. And really, really interesting. A couple of records held by Jimmy. I think one relating to youngest person to take five in England was Shoaib Bashir, which I'm sure we'll go on to talk about. So already Jimmy being written out of the history books, a game post-retirement. But look, I guess a comprehensive win for the England team. And look, I guess some positives that the West Indies can take away from that. But they did capitulate a little bit in that second innings, losing, I think, 9 for 80 odd in pretty much a session, right, to lose the Test match.
Can we start there? Because I actually think we're probably going to spend, I think, a lot of this time on the pod probably praising some of the English players. You know, there's a lot of individual contributors for England in this game in particular, but you know they've obviously won the series quite comprehensively. But for 3 days, this was a really quite a tight test, right? And I mean, listen, taking back the curtain, it's pretty hard to actually watch this here in New Zealand. Raj is fortunate, has the VPN that can kind of access some other,
Raj doesn't have a VPN.
No, he doesn't.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
Doesn't have a VPN.
If that's, Raj has found a way to watch it much better than I have. And Binksy was, over in Australia, so was able to watch, through the ECB channels. So kind of talk me through a little bit before we go on to the England stuff that I have seen a bit more of. Talk me through some of the stuff for the West Indies that they're positives for them, because I mean, we've seen Kavem Hodge gets 100. We talked last time when we were trying to, all the backlash of that first test was, oh gee, this is terrible. Like this is the death of Test cricket and all of the overreactions that kind of happen. And you might look at this on paper, the individual result, and say 240 runs. It's a big margin in the end. But the West Indies, I think, must, at least on paper, have shown some positive signs that, all of the glimpses of skills that some of that top order has, maybe some of it's going to, if they can stick with those guys, there's a chance that some of it could come to fruition.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some positives for the batting. We seem to always overreact a little bit when teams go to England, and we forget actually it's hard to bat in England. It's hard to score runs in England, especially early season. But this pitch was a lot flatter, and we got to see a little bit more with the bat. I was really excited by Alick Athanaze. I'm going to pronounce it that way. I didn't see too much of this test. I saw a lot of the first test. And Kavem Hodge, they looked very, very good with the bat. They built a partnership as well in the first test as well, but here they were able to sort of put a score on the board and put some partnerships together. And I'm also a real big fan of Mikhail Louis as well. He's got a real good technique. And I actually think that if he can get away and get a couple of good scores, he can be a mainstay in that West Indies sort of top order, 40-plus opener for them. Going
Just
into
keeps
the future.
nicking it, doesn't he?
He does, but that sometimes means you're in form, right? That you're actually able to nick the ball. But
yeah, I've been saying that to you guys about Will Young for 2 years, and nobody seems to believe me.
Isn't it the anniversary of when you scored 100 as well? You were saying
yesterday. Yeah,
well done.
My only 100, career 100.
But I think there
when
was
you say anniversary, this wasn't last year.
Oh no! Look, Facebook sent me a message saying I'd posted something saying first career ton.
was in the post-Facebook era then. So it's
it was 12 years ago.
12 years
It was in the UK against, on tour against 70-year-old men and 12-year-old boys. So, real quality outfit. But, I walked off the field at 20 overs into the game and had retired on 100. So
I definitely, if just going back to the actual cricket,
The
international cricket, I do think that there's a lot to be positive, definitely with the batting of the West Indies, and even with the bowling. Even though England have gotten away and scored runs in all the innings that they've batted in, they have created chances and they just haven't backed up their bowlers in the field a little bit, the West Indies. But there's definitely things to be positive about.
Yeah, look, I think coming after the first innings, really, you wouldn't have expected the West Indies to get a first innings lead in this game. And I think if I kind of flip it and talk, from an England perspective about that, they probably didn't show that sort of ruthlessness that they needed to in that first innings. I think that, there's a real opportunity for Harry Brook, Ben Stokes, Jamie Smith, that engine room to really put that game out of sight after Ollie Pope's 100. And, let's talk about that 100. There was a couple of chances in there.
Yes, talking about letting people off the hook. I think West Indies definitely did with Pope.
So I think, look, you can spin that in a number of different ways. But, ultimately, I think, to then get a first innings lead, albeit very, very fleetingly, because Duckett came and knocked it off in about 4 balls or something like that after the break. But to build on Raj's point, really, and I said this at the start of the series, I really like the look of Alick Athanaze. I'd seen a little bit of him in the one day series. He looks a very graceful player. And again, this is his test best, 82. He probably wants to get to that 3-figure mark. But I think that the key for me and that the positivity that you take away from this is they were facing a guy bowling at 97 miles an hour, and they didn't look phased. And I think if you talk to a lot of the top players, that they do talk about that extreme pace being something that is scary when you kind of go up and play that level. So I think that the way that they did that, I'm pretty sure Wood went wicketless, didn't he? Oh, got 1 wicket in that first innings, and was probably a little bit unlucky from that perspective. But they've got to take a lot of positives out of the way that they built through that middle order with Athanaze, Hodge, and De Silva as well, getting 80 odd. I still think Jason Holder, for a guy that averages under 30, batting at 5, I'd like to know who's on the money ball for West Indies, because they're looking at a different set of stats than anyone else to see that that's going to be a decent on base percentage for Jason Holder batting at 5. But they've got some positives that they can take out of this game. But then I bemoan England for not being ruthless. They then bloody were in the second innings. Ben Duckett, he must be one of the most difficult players to bowl at in world cricket in terms of being able to plan, because normally you bowl channel to people and they'll nick it. You bowl channel to him and he doesn't leave the ball, and he seems to, he nicks off occasionally, but everybody nicks off occasionally. There just doesn't seem to be that, that ability. And I'm not saying he's anywhere near as Steve Smith, but I think if you look at the way that, the traditional ways of getting people out, you try and bowl the traditional way to Steve Smith and he just waits for you to get a little bit straight and he doesn't miss. And Duckett's got to be the same in terms of having some bowling coaches scratching their heads around what's the plan to get him out.
That's it. I mean, I like your Smith comparison, only to say I love watching Ben Duckett bat, and I don't Steve Smith is an acquired taste, really, as a batting to watch from a batting point of view.
Not one I've acquired yet, but
exactly, yeah. But as we've said, he's a wonderful player. But he's not the most fluent to watch sometimes. But I love watching Duckett play, because it's just, we talked about it a lot, right? He plays at every single ball. He's, and the way he plays, he's just looking for opportunities to score at all times. And the small part that I did get to see live of this game was when he, was able to go on and in that first innings when they put the 50 on 4.5 overs or whatever it was, and Ian Bishop was on, who, we could sit and listen to him all day, Ian Bishop talk, but he was talking about how, must have been before the game, Stuart Broad had been on and talking about the lengths that you need to bowl at Trent Bridge, and basically how you needed to be slightly fuller. You need to be brave at Trent Bridge and try and hit the top of off stump. And, they were doing that while Jaden Seals was running in and bowling and just not getting it right. Like he bowled those 4 balls that Duckett hit for 4, He bowled a full one. He bowled one slightly too short. And then he came around the wicket, bowled one and jagged all over the place. And Duckett's played, big slash, missed. He under-edged one. Like, there's stuff going on all the time. But, this test is a great example of how it just gives them such a boost when, like, him and Crawley obviously didn't come off as much, but the way they're able to get the innings started and so those guys are coming out most of the time, the guys that you mentioned, the Stokes, the Brooks, the Jamie Smith, if it's going to be him for the longer term, they're coming out in positions where they can bat freely.
But not only that, the bowlers are on the back foot. The bowlers don't know what to do next, even when they take a wicket. It's the way Ben Duckett is. I actually liked the intent that the West Indies showed in this game compared to the last game. They batted more like Ben Duckett does. Feels like he's got a finite number of balls that he knows he's going to face in every innings. He needs to score as quickly as possible in those sort of balls, and he respects the good ones, but he really punishes the bad ones. And I really liked the way that the West Indies applied themselves. Obviously, especially in the first innings, the second innings was a little bit worse, but the run rate was up around that 4, which I think is becoming kind of standard. Definitely, when you're playing England, you need to sort of be scoring a little bit quicker.
Yeah, you can't bat you're right. If you can't bat long periods of time, and it doesn't sort of work out. You mentioned Pope before. Do you want to talk a little bit about him, Binksy? Because I find him such an interesting character. I mean, even thinking back to the past 12 months of him, and every time I look at him, he never looks convincing. In my head, I sort of feel like he could get out at any time. But then you'd love to have his average batting at number 3, and he's got that 200 in India, and he's got the 100. He's turned, he had some luck in this game, but he turned it into 100. So I don't know. He felt like he was under a bit of pressure going into this test. Where are we kind of at with Ollie Pope?
Yeah, look, I don't think he's under a massive amount of pressure. He's vice captain. I think they rate him extremely highly. His average, I disagree with that slightly. Average is 35, which probably isn't.
Isn't it number 3? Isn't his average at number 3 a lot higher? Maybe.
I don't know. I don't have those figures easily to hand, but his overall average, which is a pretty good metric of his average performance in his Test career. He's 35. For me, that needs to be closer to 45 and closer to his first class average. And he's prolific in the first class game, until really, really recently. He averaged nearly 100 at his home ground, the Oval. Granted, good batting wicket. He for me, he still does just look a little bit too frenetic when he goes out to bat. I know a lot of England players have had this habit of downing a Red Bull as they walk down the steps. I don't know whether he's got that, but it is just that it doesn't breed for me that sort of confidence. And even though Crawley, who was unlucky, I think he got run out backing up in this game and nicked off in the first innings, which happens, right?
Yeah.
But the way that they have that intent, I think gives me a lot more confidence. So there's still some question marks for him. He's undoubtedly talented. He's got some big hundreds, and he's got them in. He's got a brilliant 100 in South Africa against a fiery pace attack. So he's certainly got the skills. But he needs to start to pay the bills now a little bit for England for me and continue in the vein of form that he's had in this game. Like at the end of the day, he's got 170 runs in the game. You're going to take that every day of the week. But I just like to see him a little bit calmer, particularly batting at 3.
I feel like he's been asked to lean into that freneticness, if I can use that as an adjective there. I feel like he's been asked to sort of lean into that at number 3. I always used to watch him, just to your point, Stu, I always used to watch him and I thought he actually looked really good. I liked the way he looked at the crease, but you felt like him getting out the next ball was always a possibility. I feel like he's been asked to sort of lean into that, and his strike rates have been going up and up and up, particularly when he's been batting at 3. I've definitely seen that. Would you say, Binksy, that he is the number 3 that they're looking at for the Ashes?
Yeah, look, I don't think they're going to move too far away from this batting lineup. I think they've got that locked in, and I think they know what their plan is, obviously, from a bowling perspective as well, and that's to get 3 or 4 guys that can bowl quick. And then, we'll come on to talk about him, I'm sure, but they've put their eggs in the basket of Shoaib Bashir as the spinner. So I think they're going to want to see Mark Wood. I think they're going to want to see Gus Atkinson and, Jofra Archer's come out today, I think, and said, he's targeting that 25, 26 Ashes. He really wants to be on the plane. So the game plan is really, really clear. So, yeah, I think Pope is, penciled in or even probably, inked in, but with, some ability to maybe erase it with some nail varnish remover or something. What I'd like to see from him is, I think he can show, if they have asked him to lean into that frenetic nature, I'd like to see him channel a little bit more of the way Joe Root does that. And Joe Root, in my view, is now back to his best. We didn't see that scoop come out until he was 100 plus.
You're not a fan of the scoop?
Look, it's not just the scoop. It's, I think, the fact that he can average 50 at a strike rate of 70 in Test cricket by being really busy. And I think if Pope comes out with the intention of, I want to be busy and I want to put fielders under pressure, a little bit like Ben Duckett, I know he scores a lot of boundaries, but he also just takes whatever runs are on offer. If that's, hit the sweeper hard, he does it. And runs hard and puts fielders under pressure and runs, sharp singles, and almost looks to go out there and get his game started in a sort of a one-day mode of, where can I get one and get off strike and wait for that bad ball. Root does that really well. I think Pope should be, looking at the way that Root does that to find that positive intent that doesn't need to look like a cat on a hot tin roof would be the way I'd categorise it.
And before we go, let's finish on Bashir. Before we go there, Chris Woakes.
Yeah.
So he now has a 30-run discrepancy between his average at home. He's averaging 21 with the ball at home and 50 overseas.
Yeah.
What is the plan with him? Because I feel like his selection was a little bit out of left field. We've now seen 2 tests with him. They've used him to bat at number 8 and open the bowling.
And they were key wickets actually that started that. He got Bashir probably will get the credit for that 5 for, and he deserves some credit for what he did. But for Woakes to get Brathwaite and another wicket in that spell was, I think they were the key wickets of that, the collapse that started for the West Indies, because Brathwaite was starting to look really good.
What is his role in the England team, and what is his role in the Ashes, if there is a role?
Yeah,
surely there's no role in that Ashes.
Look, the way that they've answered that question is, and Woakes, I think, said after that first Test match, I know my record's not great overseas, but I still want to be someone that can prove some critics wrong. I think I'm not going to put him in the same category as Jimmy Anderson, but Jimmy Anderson had to find ways to take wickets overseas. Woakes is going to have to try bloody hard to do that at this stage in his career. But I think probably the difference is, and look, when you kind of reflect on it pragmatically, James Anderson probably could have carried on for the rest of this summer, and he'd have probably taken 15 wickets. He'd have probably gone past Warne's 708. He'd have probably, had a bit of a swan song at his home ground of Old Trafford. And I don't think anybody would have begrudged him that, right? But he was in that sort of, 79 to 81 mile an hour bracket with his speeds. He at times looked threatening, but we've also seen him look a little bit less threatening over the course of the last 12 months. The stats would suggest that he's still, warranted his place. Woakes is a little bit quicker. And I think we've got to also remember, Woakes came in and changed that Ashes series last English summer. He came in with Wood for that Test match, third Test match. I think got player of the match for England. He might have even got player of the series for England, not for the whole series. So his recent form at home is good enough, I think, for him to be leading what is an inexperienced attack with Woakes, Atkinson, Wood, and now Bashir.
Surely that's part of it, isn't it? Don't you think? Like that must be the stable. Like he's the. They want to have someone that is the stabilizer that can kind of continue that transition to this new bowling attack that they want to have. I mean that's how I would view it, and how they think he's going to do a great job for us at home. Let's keep that going.
I mean, and traditionally that is not how we think when we pick our 11s. But is that okay? Is it okay to pick a guy for the home series.
Well, the average is 20 at home and can bat really, really well at number 8.
But you can't use his average at home and not use Ollie Pope's average at 3. You have to use the average across the whole thing.
Okay, fair enough. Well, his average, his average across the whole thing is still good enough, I think. It'd be around 30, wouldn't it, if the maths is correct there? So, look, 28.8. There you go. So, look, absolutely. I don't doubt that there's a big discrepancy. I personally don't see him being part of when we think about what that pace attack will look like. I think, look, it's too early to really call Atkinson, but he's certainly shown some promise in these 2 Test matches. I think they will want one of Jofra or Wood on the park. It's hard to see Woakes being part of a 3 or 4 man pace attack with Stokes, and when they've got some of that other firepower around. But you never know. But I think he's there to really gel and lead this young attack on the field.
You think Ollie Robinson could bat 8?
I think he could bat 8, and again, I don't know what the conversation with Ollie Robinson has been. Whether they've struck a line through him, or whether they've said to him, you need to go away and play a whole county season and show the fitness levels that we want to see. Because again, I think he could be a phenomenal bowler. I think of someone like Stuart Clark for Australia, who came quite late really to the party from an age perspective. And, he was stuck behind some pretty decent similar seamers, McGrath, Gillespie, because he was a line bowler, wasn't he, really?
Yeah, I always think, though, with those Aussies, they're all quicker than you think. Like, that's the thing. And like, that's always been the thing for New Zealand. Like, we've always had so the last 10 years, say, we've thought, okay, we've got like a comparably good bowling attack, on paper. Yeah. And then you go to play in Australia, and all their bowlers are 10 Ks quicker than you.
They deal with the bounce better too from a bowling perspective.
They just... And Clark was probably that 135, where Robinson is maybe like 120, 130, isn't he?
So I think there was times when he was a bit quicker. So look, I would like to see him go and do whatever they've asked him to do. And if they've said to him, mate, nah, I'd like to see him go away and go, I'm going to prove you wrong, and I'm just going to tear up trees, and my speeds are going to be there, and my fitness is going to be there. And then look, we've not even talked about Harry Brook. But I do want to get on to Shoaib Bashir. So I might ask Raj, because there's been a bit of press around Harry Brook. What this is, again, let's not get too carried away. This is his first 100 at home, I believe. But yeah, what's Harry Brook's ceiling? And then Lip, should we come on? And I'm really keen to ask you a question about what you think of Bashir as well.
What's his average? He's averaging 62 though.
Yeah.
Even though he's how many hundreds he got? He's got 500s in tests. Is that his first at home, is it?
That's his first at home. 14
games.
14 tests, 500s, that's pretty good.
At a strike rate of 90.
And I think that's the key.
Useful, isn't it?
Like the kind of cricket that England want to play, that we think they want to play, he fits it perfectly, batting at 5, 6, wherever they want to put him. I think his ceiling is massive. I don't think there is one at the moment. He's going to put that ceiling on himself eventually, but he could be really one of the greats. I mean, he's averaging 62 through 14 tests. I could easily see him carrying this form through for a number of years.
He's
red and white ball.
Yeah,
he's going to be one. I guess when you play for England, it's different, isn't it? In terms of like, he's the candidate for me. He's so well suited to the white ball game as well, though, isn't he? So like, he's someone who, if they were playing outside of England, Australia, or India, you'd go, maybe his ceiling is restricted by the fact that how much of a draw is Test cricket going to be for him. But he's going to be playing for England, you would think, at least for the next 5 years. Yeah. As we see what happens with cricket over that time, Test cricket is still going to be. There's still going to be those windows for him to play Test cricket and, be a big factor. So, yeah, like you say,
there is the danger that he falls into that sort of Johnny Bairstow kind of how he's moulded and how he's had a sort of ceiling put on all his sort of cricket. But at the moment, Harry Brook, I feel like, has been brought up in a system where they want to play this kind of cricket, and it really suits him to a T all throughout their formats of cricket. So.
Yeah. And he's got a Test wicket as well, so he's only 291 behind Jack Callis as well. Yeah,
yes. Very good Test wicket, Mr. K. Williamson.
Yes. Can I ask you a little bit about Shoaib Bashir? So, look, this is often talked about. He was playing minor counties cricket 18 months or so ago. Got snapped up by Somerset, who saw him, I think, play some second 11 cricket. Was discovered, if you believe the hype on Twitter, by Ben Stokes sending some footage of him bowling to Alistair Cook, to Rob Key and Brendan McCullum, and saying, "What do you reckon, guys, as a bolter for India?" And my question really to you, Stu, on Bashir is, from an off-spinning perspective, what's his ceiling? And I think that the second part of that question is, England don't play traditional Test cricket anymore, so him bowling in first innings and holding isn't going to be an option. They're going to want him to take wickets, and what impact's that going to have? Because clearly he's not going to be as effective if there isn't a bit of spin on days 1 and 2.
Yeah, he's someone. It's really interesting because he's someone that, from a purely aesthetic point of view, it's taken me a while to warm up to him because, I love the Nathan Lyon style, the traditional run. That's the kind of bowler I was always trying to be. The run in, great, get high in your action, get a big jump, drive your knee through. Bashir's none of that. Like the way he comes into the crease and all of that is very different. They're different, but he kind of reminds me more of like Sakleen Mushtaq in the way that he approaches the crease and things like that. But I love his approach. He just doesn't. He doesn't look overawed by the moment in any way. You talk about that the holding bowler is gone. I don't think he cares in the slightest about that. About getting hit for boundaries. I don't know. We saw the other day they were posting the county championship, right, where he got hit for 40 odd or something, didn't he? And
Dan Lawrence
and over.
Yeah, 5 sixes and an over.
Yeah, and even in this game, Holder hit him for a big 6, gets him next ball. Like he's not like. Even thinking back to that in the India series, it didn't seem like going into that environment, going into be bowling to some of the best players of spin in the world, some of the greats of the game, didn't seem to faze him at all. And I love that about him. He seems really, he wants to get wickets. He spins the ball. Like there's a lot of positive things that I see in him. And yeah, I don't know. I think that his ceiling is tricky because you sort of start to think about he's just so young. Like that's the thing. And spinners, when I think about it, I think he'll really benefit from the age and from more games, because when he becomes a cleverer bowler, not saying he's not a smart bowler, but I think at the moment, a lot of time he's being able to kind of benefit from some of those things that I actually don't like aesthetically. The way he runs in means that he's kind of skids the ball through at times. He's been able, so people have gone back to him. You saw that in the second innings. Hodge went back to him. Hodge was trying to go back to him the whole game, I think, but that one that he got to skid through, when the ball started to spin, he does get, serious purchase. He got that one to Hodge. I think he went through the gate of Holder. He went through the gate of someone else and it just missed the stumps. He's got all of the wicket-taking parts of the game. If he turns, but that only gets you so far. The real greats, the real great spinners, they have it up here. They have it, they figure bowlers out, or batters out. And, it's been replayed so many times, but the Warne bowling to McCullum, talking you through how he's going to get you out. That's
in fairness, that was in the Big Bash after he'd got 500 Test wickets.
Yes, no, I'm not saying that he should be on that level, but that is the elite level that you want to get to. But I don't think, I think skill's going to get him a long way. I think he's certainly in this style. I can see exactly why McCullum and Stokes think he's a better bet than a Jack Leach, who I just, I have a lot of respect for what Jack Leach has been able to achieve in the sport, but I don't think he's got the pure raw wicket taking ability that Bashir does, and it seems like that's what they want. They want bowlers who can get me wickets.
I think Rob Key said before the series started that he's a wicket-taking bowler, Bashir, 100%. But he also needs to learn how to take wickets when the ball's not spinning, when the ball's not doing things like that. It's about outthinking. It's about bowling with flight and guile. All these sort of old-school terms around finger spin bowling. And he's in a unique position, as you alluded to, that he's actually learning on the job. He's very young. He and that I was actually a little bit disappointed he didn't get a role in the first test. I know, they did a great job with the ball, with the seam bowling, but those are the kind of decks where if the bowlers don't get it right, you want him to be able to come and rescue it or help it out. And he needs to get experience from that, and he didn't get it, unfortunately, in the first test, but it's really good to see that he came through and didn't miss a beat. How many did he get? 7 in the match, I think.
Yeah,
7 in the match.
The 2 in the first innings were kind of gifts.
Right. But as a spinner, you get those, don't you?
Totally.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. More test wickets than first class wickets already.
Yeah,
which is a crazy thing to think of after
it's
just
bizarre,
5 test matches.
And I mean, look, it's very clear. I mean, we kind of think it's a bit silly that not silly, but it's out from when you're outside of the Ashes cycle. It's kind of weird to me that so much is being put towards let's build this team for this Ashes. But
some of that might be media rather than necessarily coming from the team, I think.
Yes, I think that's also a fair comment. But I guess thinking that far ahead, the way that Bashir bowls, the kind of skiddy nature and also the height and all of those kind of things, he probably is better suited than a traditional than a Leach is to bowl in Australia. And if that's what they're thinking, then yes, even though talk about a traditional off spinner, Nathan Lyon's been able to be such a fantastic bowler, but he's got the overspin, he's got the brain, and
Do you see any of Gautam Patel in him? He's obviously got his own personal bowling coach, because Gautam is the spin bowling coach for England now.
Yeah, I don't necessarily. No, he's not. Well, not in the like running into bowl kind of way, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's helpful having Gautam there. I think Jeaton's probably an interesting person in the sense that he sort of went through a lot in his career as well, and he's had a lot of I really think that would be the most useful thing. I don't know, just thinking personally, like actually having someone who's kind of had really good moments. They've had a lot of moments where they've had to sit and watch other people do stuff. They've had he was such a key wicket taker in the county championship, obviously, where he was like the number one bowler for a long time.
Yeah.
And then he came back to then he got another opportunity for New Zealand and actually did reasonably well in that. So yeah, I think from that perspective, I mean, great to learn from someone like that.
Awesome. Let's move on. We're going to talk about the start of the Gautam Gambhir era of Indian cricket. So it seems ages ago, doesn't it, the World Cup? But a completely different looking side for India, albeit for 5 T20s against what was a poor to average Zimbabwe side, despite a shocking game one.
They're a side that weren't even at that T20 World Cup.
Exactly, yeah.
So,
but Raj, might come to you first. What are your initial sort of thoughts around the way that era started? Any clues for what we might see moving forward?
Gambhir wasn't actually on that.
No, he
tour,
wasn't.
But he is starting to. I mean, obviously, he would have been involved in the selection, and they're about to. I think in 2 days' time, they're about to play Sri Lanka in a series. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. There's been a lot of articles going around and, he's saying all the right things, talking about how he's going to deal with the, Rohit, Kohli, all of those sort of bigger players, as well as try and nurture the younger players. They've obviously made some decisions around leadership and who's going to lead them in the white ball squads. So just for the listeners, Hardik has been, not really selected to have any leadership positions in those white ball squads. And who was it? It is... Sky in the T20 and Gill Sky in both, and Gill to sort of back him up as a vice captain there, obviously nurturing him through. So I think there's positive steps to go through. Gautam Gambhir is an interesting sort of character. Obviously I don't know him personally. It's just what I've seen in the media and all of that stuff. And he has this real sort of drive to win, real sort of aggressive way of going about it. Does that work with everybody? We'll find out. It definitely worked for KKR this IPL, so why not?
Do you guys think the Sky Hardik, like the media has certainly been trying to make it a big deal? Personally, I look at that and go, and then the follow up comments from from the coaching staff around, like, they didn't explicitly say it wasn't like we were deciding between these two, but they talked about Hardik and how he's played less than 50% of the games, the T20 games. Yeah. They want to manage his workload so that he can still be a contributor in all three formats. I feel like of course, this is a completely rational decision. If we're going forward to the T20 World Cup, they're going to play a ton of different games. They're going to, we've seen in these, like the series against Zimbabwe, now the series against Sri Lanka, there's so much depth in Indian cricket that they're just going to be rotating a whole bunch of different guys. And if, for Sky, that is his main format, it makes complete sense to me, and I think is a non-issue as long as the communication. I mean, all of this is around communicate. A lot of coaching is around communication, isn't it? It's around kind of making sure that everyone's on the same page. And if they've said that to Hardik and they've relayed it in the right way to him, that you are still we still see you as a valuable leader. We've seen your impact in the T20 World Cup. We want you to be at your best for all of these major tournaments. I just think this is a non-issue.
The only question I really have is around: are they looking to play in a certain way, and they'll identify a group of players, or will they want to have that figurehead as a captain, as they've had with Kohli for a long time, and then Sharma for a long time? The question I probably have is: there's so much depth in that batting unit. You've got the likes of Gaikwad, Jaiswal, Dubé. We can go and name probably 12 guys that should be batting in the top six, and Sky's one of them. And when he starts to have a bad run of form, and someone's tearing up trees in the IPL, it's just that pressure of you're the captain, and your form's under a little bit of pressure. And he won't be the first person to go through that. But that's probably the interesting thing for me is, have they picked that on character? Is he the figurehead now for the next cycle? What's the planning? And as you rightly say, what's the communication behind that in the background as well?
I definitely think that, sort of going on that point, the real telling quote was from Ajit Aggarkar saying, captain needs to be on the field, talking about Hardik there. And I don't think that was said in a...
Wasn't a dig.
It wasn't a dig.
Yeah.
I think it actually refers back to how they've been burnt in the past. When Virat, when Kohli stepped down, Rohit Sharma was elevated to that captain status. He missed every second series, it felt like, almost with niggles and injuries, and they wanted to be able to rest him, which is fair enough. They've picked someone here in Sky, like you said, who has that sort of white ball format. And if he's not available, they've got a young captain who they definitely have tagged for the future, who will just step up and take over as and when required.
A lot of faith in Gill, don't they? And I mean, seems he's obviously a very talented player. You touched on Kohli and Sharma and stuff before. I think the most telling part is to see them in this one day squad. The ODI squad. Obviously they've retired from the T20s, but you talked about a lot had been made in the media, certainly, about how Gambhir was going to maybe not hold certain players up in the highest. Like everyone was going to be treated in the same way, and nobody was going to be given special treatment. I think the most telling part is to say, well, we're picking you. Like, we are picking you. This is a series against Sri Lanka. We expect to win at home, but you are still part of the side, and you're going to get first opportunity to be at that Champions Trophy. And I mean, personally, I expect that they'll both be there anyway. They're obviously still brilliant players, but if they weren't in that squad, I think this would be a much bigger conversation, and the actions sort of speak for me louder than anything else they could have said.
Raj, before you answer that as well, do you think that sends a message that that's a World Cup cycle conversation, or do you think it's just short-term planning for that Champions Trophy?
100%. They've won the 2020 World Cup and drawn a line underneath it. It's time to move on and look at the next sort of tournaments that they're going. Champions Trophy, I think, would be more of a stepping stone sort of tournament. They really want to win those World Cups in both of those white ball formats. I do think it's interesting. A lot of the success that they've had overseas, and I'm thinking to Australia and stuff like that, they had with someone like Rahane, someone who was a little bit more circumspect, whereas, Gambhir's coming at this like a bull in a china shop a little bit, and it could work just as well. But it's interesting to see how that approach is going to work versus something that has already worked when they've gone to Australia to be a little bit more circumspect.
Going to be fun to see that. I mean, totally off track, but that them going there for 5 tests, going to Aussie for 5 tests at the end of the year is going to be fun.
I wonder if Shane Watson will be commentating.
Well, I hope he's got a bigger shirt this time. That shirt was a problem. Hey, back on that Zimbabwe series, one of the biggest notes that came out of that for me was Washington Sundar playing and like winning player of the series, obviously having a really big role, and all of our T20 World Cup stuff. We often we're talking about Akshar, and Akshar wasn't on that tour, but Jadeja just retired from T20 cricket. The Washington Sundar stuff though was a big surprise to me because, I mean, obviously he's still held in really high regard, but he's had pretty underwhelming. We don't see the domestic stuff, but IPL, he's had a very underwhelming IPL. I remember, having a bit of a chat with you guys during the IPL around, I had expected a lot more from him, and he's not kind of performing. What's the deal here? But yeah, I don't know. He's now in both of these squads against Sri Lanka. There is a gap, right? That is where we've talked about all the batters they have. There is, I think, if you want them to be an all-rounder, because obviously there's still Kuldeep and there's Bishnoi and there's plenty of other good spinners, but I think it seems Washington Sundar is in pole position to maybe be the that sort of number 7, number 8 kind of player that Ravi Jadeja was, which came as a surprise to me.
It definitely could be. They're looking to fill that spot. If not fill that spot, build some depth in that spot. But I think that they've got a squad where they're gonna pick horses for courses. I don't think you can take anything from this series that they were just at. Sure, he's in the Sri Lankan squad, but would he have been picked if he wasn't picked for the World Cup, right? Yeah. So would he have been picked if they were picking the sort of first choice players? But he is someone that has a bit of an aura about him. We've talked about him on the world stage before. Maybe it hasn't translated to things like the IPL, and we went through those numbers during the IPL. But the range of talent that they have in this India side, but it feels like if you go bad for one series, it's very easy to replace you unless you're, we talk about Ollie Pope just now, that, he's literally got a slate all the way through to the Ashes, probably where he is going to be there, no matter really how poorly he does. I don't feel like anyone in the Indian side could have that.
I feel like it's even getting longer. As a New Zealand fan, it's the list of names is just massive. It's actually just staggering. You named them before. I've written down there's Gill, Jaiswal, Pant, Sky, Hardik, Simpson, Dubé, Rinku, Parag, and that's all the people that are legitimately fighting for a spot in that T20 side. And then you add in all of the other guys like Kohli and Sharma and KL Rahul and Shreyas Iyer and Venki Iyer. It's actually just absolutely ridiculous. And I don't know. I mean, I think people have said to us when we were talking about that T20 World Cup, a lot of Indian fans were nervous because they hadn't won a comp for a while, and they were saying, don't say that we're the favourites, don't kind of jinx us. But how can you not, with this level of talent, go into every single tournament as just overwhelming favourites? I mean, the production line of players is quite remarkable.
Yeah, and that probably rounds us back to that, the start of that segment around Kohli and Rohit. And maybe that's the answer to that question, Stu, in that with all that talent, you still need some continuity and you still need that experience. And I think particularly in 50-over cricket, you need guys that have batted in lots and lots of different situations and conditions as well. Going to be enthralling to see what that Champions Trophy lineup looks like. But you got to be scared of India, whoever they put out in a T20 game over the course of the next 2 or 3 years. Shall we move on? We'll close up. It's not good news, I'm afraid. We're going to close up and talk. England and the White Ferns have just finished their T20 and one-day international series in England, and now a lot of the girls going off to play in the 100, which started yesterday as well. So double header. I think Sophie Devine in the runs yesterday.
Maybe, yeah.
But yeah, from a White Ferns perspective, Lip, what I'm not even going to ask you what positives we can take from that from a New Zealand cricket perspective. But thoughts.
Thoughts. 8-0 was. I think 8-0 in this case, I think does sum it up. I think you would have to squint incredibly, incredibly hard to think that any of these games really were were in the balance at, I mean, a few of them got on paper somewhat close, but, this is a fairly comprehensive performance from England and I think a disappointing performance from New Zealand in that sense. I mean, the tricky part for New Zealand I always find is that we clearly aren't at the level of Australia and England, and those are the games we play the most, and they are the sides that we get opportunities to play against the most as the White Ferns. But I think even still, there are the first couple of years, or the first year or so of the Ben Sawyer, coaching stuff, there was some positive. We felt like there were some positive signs. We obviously won the bronze medal at the Com Games. There was some big decisions made around, like, letting some of the older players move on. Amy Satterthwaite, Frankie Mackay, Lee Kasperick, who's actually back now. But there were decisions made, clear decisions. Okay, we are going to invest in some of these younger players, and I think if you want to look at positives, Fran Jonas is someone they brought in at that time. She seems to have equipped herself really well. And if we're thinking about the T20 World Cup that's coming up at the end of the year in October in Bangladesh, we would think that her, and her and Eden Carson and, Amelia Kerr, our spin bowling ranks look pretty strong. But then you go to the batters that they brought in, and it's, I don't want to pick on some of these players necessarily, but, Georgia Plimmer, Izzy Gaze are kind of the two younger players that they were hoping would make strides. And I mean, Izzy Gaze in this series, 40 runs from 5 bats in the T20 series, 16 runs from 3 bats in the ODIs. Georgia Plimmer, 26 runs from 4 bats in the T20s, 39 runs from 3 bats in the ODIs, And I think there's been a hope and that these some younger players were going to come through because, there's been an over-reliance really on Sophie Devine, on Susie Bates, on, to a lesser extent, Maddie Green, but Amelia Kerr, who at least still does, have that youth on her side. But yeah, I'm sure they would love to bring some young players through, but these are the best young players that they've identified in the country. And unfortunately, they're just not, they're not doing the job from a actual results perspective. So I think it's really challenging. And I suppose in New Zealand, we always feel like we're a chance at World Cups, but it's hard to see how we'd be any chance at this T20 World Cup. And look, I don't get, I have 3 children. I have limited time to kind of watch every single moment of cricket. So the women's game, unfortunately, I watch a lot more of the men's game than I do of the women's game. So I can't, definitively comment about the depth of our young cricket stocks. But, when you look at domestic cricket, it's hard to see where this improvement is coming from. And it leaves you, I don't know, it's left me a bit despondent really about what's next, And
it's one of those series where, you jokingly said before, I'm not going to ask you what New Zealand take out of it. There probably will be some harsh lessons to take out of it, probably not as many positives. But looking at the positive side for you, Binksy, England must have taken a lot out of it. 8-0, a lot of confidence going into the next fixtures.
Yeah, look, you can't argue, can you? You take 8-0 in 2 formats. I think the pleasing thing for England is, look, there's probably been not a massive amount of transition out of the side in recent terms. We've obviously had maybe Catherine Brunt, who's retired recently. What's nice to see is Maya Bashir come in and get runs average 90 across that series. And then you mentioned the New Zealand spin stocks. I think the England spin stocks looking really, really healthy. Strong. Charlie Dean, Sophie Eccleston, and Sarah Glenn, who was player of the series, Leggy. So that was really good. And then I think also we've got some young quick bowlers coming onto the scene. Lauren Filer, who's quick. And I think that's probably been the one thing that England have maybe been missing, but when they've been playing against Australia particularly. And I think the positive thing for England now is they've got that exact blend, I think, for the next 2 or 3 years. You'd think that Nat Sibber-Brunt, Heather Knight, Danny Wyatt, Tammy Beaumont, are all going to be around for that period of time to really bring those that really young players through. And then the fact that you've got those people that have had a bit of cricket now in Charlie Dean, Sophie Eccleston, etc. That's going to be, really stand them in good stead if they do want to challenge that Australian side, which, is ridiculously strong in the women's game. So this is the little mini era, I think, where England do have an opportunity if they can get those girls together for a period of time to have a crack at Australia the next time around.
Yeah, well, and look, we're seeing other sides around. I think, again, from a New Zealand point of view, we're seeing other sides around the world starting to put more emphasis on the women's game. And, New Zealand have done that to a degree in terms of the financial part of it, the balance of pay and the match fees and all that kind of stuff. But, we're seeing other teams play Test cricket and other teams play more series probably than us around the world. So, I don't know. It's I think about that World Cup coming up and think, New Zealand's going to be very lucky to make the semi-finals, I think, and unless we get a remarkable performance from some of those spinners or some of those batters.
Yeah. And that probably wraps up the main agenda, Lip. Is there anything on any other business list that you want to run through before we wrap up?
Not a huge conversation point, but I think anyone who does enjoy New Zealand cricket should have a read of the Paul Wiseman article that was on Cricinfo this week. I will just give a shout out to that. I thought it was very, very interesting, an interview of Paul Wiseman, and then the article built on that, and sort of talking more around an inside look, I guess, at the development scene here in New Zealand and what they're trying to achieve, mainly on the men's side of things. Tim Robinson, Dean Foxcroft and Mitch Hay, sort of the next cab off the rank sort of players here for New Zealand, and players that I think people have high hopes for. Certainly, at least three. All three of those guys, probably Foxcroft has had the more opportunities so far and hasn't quite taken them in his limited international stuff. But they've just been over in India, over working on facing spin and techniques playing spin. They've talked, Wiseman kind of then talked about various players, young players that they're hoping to bring up through the New Zealand stocks, and a lot of focus, I think, on the seam bowling side. Naming all of the recent sort of Binksy as Will O'Rourke, but then the next ones down below, like the Zach Folkes and Matt Fisher, and he actually seemed very, very high on Ben Lister, which he seemed a lot higher on Ben Lister than personally I have been in the past. So talked about getting Kyle Jameson back on the field and things. So I just found it very, very interesting read and would recommend it to anyone.
Good. Well, I'm sure we can put a link in the show notes if you do want to do a bit of reading on Cricinfo. But for now, it is going to be good night and God bless from us all here at Top Order Towers. We've got the England Test match starting on Friday. We've got a Test match just about to kick off in about an hour's time in Belfast, Ireland, Zimbabwe. So Zimbabwe flying from a hiding against India into Stormont, I think, for that single Test match, only Test match in that. Can you call it a series when it's only one game? I don't know. And it still blows my mind every time I log into Cricinfo recently. Texas have beaten New York. You don't see that very often, do you?
Yeah. Finn Allen scored some runs the other day.
And Devon Conway as well. So, it is a bit brighter for New Zealand cricket. Maybe we'll cover that on the next episode. But it is good night and God bless from us here in Auckland. We'll see you soon on the Top Order podcast. Good night.